Yo, what's up? This is Ipos Audio. My name is Liam, aka Ipos, aka Sacred Law, and right now I'm going to be doing a basic tips and tricks for beginners in Native Instruments Massive. So later on, I'm going to do in a later video, I'm going to do an in-depth tutorial of Native Instruments Massive. In this tutorial, I might touch on a couple of similar topics, but I'm not gonna go as deep as I am in the in-depth tutorial. This is just going to be a couple of things that beginners can, um, just little bits and pieces to wrap your heads around. Um, and yeah, hopefully this will open up Massive and show you, I don't know, sort of inspire you to experiment and try new things in Massive. So yeah, so when you're making your own sounds in Massive, um, what happens a lot is you go to File and hit New Sound, and you get this default patch. Now there are two things running, and these are usually the first two things that I look at. One of them is that oscillator 1 is on, and it's turned to saw wave. And there's envelope 4, which is by default assigned to the amp mod and the bypass mod. So the oscillator being on means that we are generating a raw sound. In this case, it's that saw wave. And then, because this envelope is on and assigned to the amp mod and the bypass mod, we are shaping the amplitude of the sound over time based on when we press down on the key and when we let go of the key that we're playing. Now you can see, if you click into the routing tab, you can see how Massive is set up. Here's our oscillators. And then they can run through the inserts and into filter 1, there's filter 2, and then after the filtering system, we've got another set of inserts. Then right here, we've got the amp and the pan, and that's where envelope 4 is taking effect. That's when it's, so it goes through all of this, and then it gets shaped or enveloped right here. Then we've got some feedback, the FX, the EQ, and then out through the master. So that's where this envelope is active, in the amp mod and the bypass mod phase. So pretty naturally, these are the first two things that I look at, usually. Mess with the oscillator, mess with the envelope. There's one more thing that I like to look at towards the beginning, and that's the voicing tab, which is right above envelope 4. Here we've got the voicing box, and then down here we've got the trigger box. So I have the max number of voices set to 64. Sometimes it's like 16 or something like that. That means, and it's right here it's set to 1, so that means every time I play a key, I've got one oscillator on, so there's only one voice being played. Now if I turn oscillator 2 on, there's one voice per oscillator, so I've got two voices playing. Now I can turn it up to 2, and I've got two voices per oscillator, so there's 4 voices. And so on and so forth. That's 6 voices, 8 voices. So yeah. But every time you turn up the number of voices, you'll notice that the amplitude is getting louder and louder. So you want to compensate by turning down the master volume. So we're in polyphonic. That means we can play multiple keys. And and play chords and shit like that. But just something to keep in mind, if you're playing multiple notes, um, and you've got a lot of notes, a lot of voices stacking on top of each other, um, if you have too many voices playing at once, um, you have a ceiling at 64, and it starts to cut voices out if you're playing too many of them, and that can kind of mess up your sound. So or create inconsistencies in your sound. So just be aware of that. Um, Over here we've got polyphonic, monophonic, rotate. So polyphonic is multiple notes, monophonic is single notes. And you'll notice that we've got this kind of gliding pitch effect. That's because in the oscillator tab, the glide is now active, because in the voicing tab, we're in monophonic. Same thing goes for mono rotate. You can take the glide out if you want, or make it longer. Um, so, in monophonic, when you're playing a single note, if you think of this as the point when you press down on the key and it starts to play, and then that's the sound wave. And then you let go and play again, and then it starts right at the same point. Now that can cause a click. That's if you're in monophonic. That can cause an audible click from the end of the note to the beginning, and it restarts how the note's being played. But if you're in mono rotate, you'll be playing the note, and then you'll switch to the next note, and it'll stay in the same. It'll still be. That's not properly explained, but that's kind of what's happening. So mono rotate is sort of like finding the point where you stopped, and then the next note, it starts at that point where you stopped and keeps on going, rather than constantly restarting every time you play a new note, for the sound wave. So yeah, if you're in monophonic and you notice a little clicking noise, just hit mono rotate. That might fix the problem. It's always about getting the cleanest, sound you're looking for. Sometimes the dirtiest sound you're looking for, but you want to remove any imperfections or blemishes that are kind of pulling your attention away from the sound. So in monophonic or mono rotate, if we're in always in the trigger section, that means the modulation sources are always restarted. For example, the envelope or the glide. So the glide, every time I play a note, it's gliding. That's because it's in always. If it's in legato, however, if I play a note, no glide. But if I play the note, hold down the key, and then while I'm holding down the key, I play another note, and the notes overlap, then it will glide. If you're in legato triller, similar to legato, you can hold down a key and play other keys, and when you let go of the other key, it will slide back to the key that you're holding down on. So I'm going to hold down on this key right here and play other notes. Okay, so that's voicing trigger. Let's turn this to always and kind of have no glide. In the voicing tab, we've got this unison spread. So if we turn this on and if we have multiple voices and turn this on, we can start to spread the pitch of the noises of the voices. And then you'll notice this if you're listening in speakers like a stereo system or in headphones. You'll probably notice that when I turn this pan position on, it will spread out the sound across the stereo. So this is without, this is with. And you can go somewhere in between as well, or back to mono if you like, or have it modulate. You can do that with an LFO or something like that. So yeah, so back to this beginning of the sound routine. We've got our oscillator, envelope, and voicing. Let's go to the envelope for a little bit. I'm going to turn this off just so we have a nice sound wave. So here's some enveloping tips. If you turn on the delay, you'll press down on the note right here, and there will be this time that elapses before the note kicks in. So I press down now, and there's a delay. I press down. Pretty simple. So that's the delay. If you're learning synthesis, it's really important. I'll explain this in another tutorial, but there's you got to learn ADSR. In massive, it's DADSR, so delay, attack, decay, sustain, and then release. Fundamental knowledge. So yeah, something that I like to do with the attack is remove it completely, turn it down, and just have it inactive. And when you do that and bring the level of the attack down, what happens is the decay becomes inverted and becomes the attack, and you get this nice smooth curvature to the attack. So up here we've got one shot. So no matter how long you hold down the note, it'll always play through this exactly over time. And then I like to mess with the release. Let's go back to polyphonic. Bring the voices down. Yeah. So if you're a beginner to synthesis, I would recommend starting out with making sounds in the square saw. There's also the square saw 2, smooth square, sine square, yeah, and the sine triangle. So all of these are basic fundamental sound waves. Everything else starts to get a little bit more complicated. This is a nice place to start making sounds, at least I think, but definitely don't let that stop you from going in and experimenting and learning how to. These are like kind of like the beginner sounds. It's easy to make pretty good sounds. These other sounds, they start to get a little bit more complicated, and it's difficult to make stuff that doesn't sound like chintzy or cheap or poorly produced or whatever. It takes this certain, you got to mess with them a little bit and understand the sound wave and kind of get into a groove with it. So yeah, mess with your basic sound waves. Something that I use a lot of is reverb. So let's go into the effects and turn on the reverb. I usually do something like this, um, have it be a big room, turn it up to here, but keep the dry wet down so that it's mostly the dry sound without the reverb on it. Bump up the density and the color a little bit. If you turn it over to the wet, the sound becomes a little bit, it's more off in the distance. Yeah. So I've shown you a little bit of envelope for our basic default envelope. Let's go to envelope 3, which isn't assigned to anything. So we're going to click on this crosshair and bring it over to the pitch of oscillator 1. We're going to turn it up by an octave. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting sound. What we're doing here is we're modulating the pitch with the envelope by 12 semitones by an octave. So because this attack is so tight, it's as if we're starting, when we press down on the note, we're starting right here and it's shooting down. We're getting this pew. This little pitch noise at the beginning, the attack of our sound, which gives it a little bit more presence. There's other things that we can do. Let's try bringing this up, this down. Maybe move this to one shot. Yeah, so we're using these two envelopes in tandem with each other. I'm tightening the release of the amplitude one before I mess with the pitch. So let's go into the routing tab so you understand where these things are in effect again. So envelope 4 is affecting the amp mod and the bypass mod right here. And envelope 3 is affecting the pitch of the oscillator 1. Okay, so this one is enveloping first, and then this one is after that. So if I bring down the tail of this one, it's going to bring down the tail of this one as well, even if this one has a longer release. Yeah, so that's another little thing that I like to mess with. I like to mess with the pitch of the oscillator. Another thing that I do is, let's turn this to sine. Go into modulation oscillator and turn on the phase on oscillator 1. that's interesting. Like that's just a sine wave, essentially. I've turned the pitch of the modulation oscillator to the ceiling, so as high as it can go, and then introduce a little bit of the phase. Yeah. So another thing that I like to mess with a lot, turn off oscillator 1, turn off the modulation oscillator. This envelope is active, but let's make it pretty static. And then go down here to our noise. It's already on by default, I guess, which I didn't notice before, but yeah, so it's on. Oh, turn this off with one shot and turn it to gate. So now we've got some noise. There's different kinds too. I really like tape hiss. Turn off the reverb so you can hear the dry. I like tape hiss. I like water pipes. Murmur. Yeah. Amp noise. Let's turn that up to filter 1. Filter 2 is off. Mix is all the way to 1. So let's go into the filter type. Band pass. Turn down the bandwidth. Turn down the resonance. Maybe some feedback. Let's make this a serial filter circuit. Turn on filter 2. So serial means filter 1 occurs first, and then filter 2 on top of that. If you're in parallel, it means that you're sending to both of them at the same time, and then both of those sounds get mixed together. But serial is this one, then this one. So in filter 2, I'm going to turn on the scream, turn this up. Oh, whoops. Um, yeah. Um, so that's some basic ideas on how to make different kinds of sounds. This is just a little bits and pieces tutorial. I'm gonna do some better stuff in the future, probably later on today. Um, so yeah, I hope you glean something and like, comment, subscribe, um, all that good stuff. And yeah, peace.